Hi there, my name is David McKinney. I'm a current senior here at CSU studying horticulture and environmental horticulture. I will be graduating here in December. My current plan is to stick around, and I will be pursuing a master's degree in the Department of Horticulture. Yeah, go horticulture. Awesome. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to the moderator of our second panel session, Innovation in Mitigation and Response. Dr. Keith Belk is a professor and holder of the Ken and Myra Muntfert Endowed Chair in Meat Sciences and director of the Center for Meat Safety and Quality in the Department of Animal Sciences at Colorado State University. He also serves as an adjunct professor at the Colorado School for Public Health. He earned his master's and bachelor's degrees from CSU and a PhD from Texas A&M University. He has been employed in the private sector as a buyer for Safeway Incorporated and by the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service in Washington, D.C. as an international marketing specialist. At Colorado State University since 1995, he has authored or co-authored 230 refereed scientific journal articles, provided over 530 invited presentations, generated more than $21 million in extramural research funding, and was the primary inventor on 2 patents. Please welcome Dr. Belk.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think you're really going to enjoy the panel that we've put together for you this afternoon. Firstly, let me ask you, have you enjoyed the program so far today? I think we've had absolutely outstanding speakers, and it's been really exciting to hear some of the things that they've had to say about innovation in agriculture. The session this afternoon and the panel that we put together for you is really sort of to wind up the day answering the question, how do we prevent and respond to crises that occur relative to safety and animal health and other things that are important in agricultural production? I think this is a particularly germane topic this week. As many of you have probably noticed if you're reading the newspapers or listening to the news, in Colorado this week, we've had a major recall at the Fort Morgan plant, which is a beef plant, because of an outbreak that occurred in the southeastern part of the United States from Escherichia coli 026. And I'll let Al talk about this more in just a second, but 026 contamination in this type of a product is really a pretty rare event. But because the nature of this event and the fact that it has caused 17 illnesses, multi-state, it's led to 6 hospitalizations and 1 death as of this morning. I think that this was an appropriate topic to spend the afternoon on. So firstly, I would like to take a second and introduce your panel to you. I think this is an awesome panel for you to have a lot of questions for. I'm going to keep my comments to a minimum and let you all dialogue with this panel because I think they have a lot of things to offer to you. I'm going to start by introducing Alfred Almanza. Al is head of JBS Global Food Safety and Quality Assurance. He's also the former Deputy Undersecretary for Food Safety and the former Administrator for USDA's Food Safety Inspection Service at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Al leads the JBS Global Food Safety and Quality Assurance efforts, ensuring that JBS facilities around the world adopt and implement food safety and quality control standards that exceed regulatory requirements and customer expectations. And all of you that know and are familiar with JBS know that they operate plants in a whole bunch of countries around the world and a lot of plants. And so that's a pretty big job. A globally recognized expert in international sanitary standards and food safety requirements that govern market access for meat and poultry products, Almanza plays a critical role in maintaining and expanding the company's access to global export markets. Before joining JBS, Mr. Almanza spent nearly 40 years with USDA FSIS. He began his career with USDA as a food safety inspector in the small plant located in the panhandle of Texas, Delhart, Texas. And so he's worked his way all the way from the very humble beginnings all the way to the top. He's eventually rose from there to an entry-level position to serve as Deputy Undersecretary for Food Safety under Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack, who was his boss sitting in the room, from September 2014 to December 2016. For nearly a decade, he served as the administrator of FSIS, leading USDA's science-based food safety modernization efforts and regulatory strategies and public health efforts to prevent foodborne illness. Please help me welcome Al Almanza. Our second panelist is Nathan Dorn. Nathan is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Food Origins. Nathan is CEO and co-founder in that early stage of precision data company that's focused on hand-harvested crops. He's a serial innovator for companies that have included Pepsi Bottling, Gallo Wineries and Vineyards, and Ryder-affiliated companies. His focus has been in energy and labor savings through system redesign and simple invention. He also serves as ag technology and ag robotics consultant to major produce companies and business startups and several universities. We're excited to have Nathan on our panel this afternoon. Please help me welcome him. Our last member of the panel, and I think given the conversations this morning, you're really going to enjoy this, is Stephen P. Laughlin. Steve is Vice President and General Manager of Global Consumer Industry, IBM Corporation. Steve is known for helping retail and consumer product clients worldwide to transform their business models and consumer-facing activities. He is a leader in implementing complex business and technology solutions that drive improved performance. In January of 2017, Women's Wear Daily listed him among the top industry transformers in the country. Steve leads IBM's consumer industry across the company's portfolio, which includes retail consumer products, wholesale distribution, and agribusiness. His organization is responsible for defining IBM's industry strategy, creating thought leadership, developing offerings and industry solutions, growing industry subject matter expertise, building delivery capabilities and capacity, and advancing client relationships and business development teams. He has 20-plus years experience in the consulting and technology services industry, serving clients and managing global and domestic practices. Steve began his career in store management at Sears and Roebuck, then entered consulting with Ernst & Young. In the past, he led key IBM consulting practices, including the company's global retail and consumer products, global smarter commerce, and the growth markets application innovation businesses. Please help me to welcome Steve to the stage. So for our panel this afternoon, I think we're going to go down starting with Al Almanza, and we're going to give them a few minutes to talk a little bit about their perspective on the topic that we've chosen to discuss this afternoon, which is essentially how do we prevent and respond to crises in the area of food production and foodborne illness outbreaks. And so, Al, take it away.
All right. So I have to start out with a little story, if I could, about budget. At JBS, quite frankly, I don't have to worry about my budget. And having Secretary Vilsack sitting here, I used to think that was something funny he used to tell me, is that in his next life, when he came back, he wanted to be the Undersecretary of Food Safety because we always got all the money that we asked for. So I don't know if that's still true, sir, but I do find it much easier to come across money at JBS. So the foodborne illness issue, that we're talking about. FSIS, or at least I can only speak to when I was there, they rely on CDC for information to inform how they're going to react to outbreaks. And so when you see some of the things that the agency is doing, people believe that sometimes they react too slowly or that they're not in front of some of these illnesses quick enough. It's not a matter of just responding or being on top of the issue. It's actually trying to figure out whether there's a connection to some of these illnesses or the association to what they call clusters. And so when the agency gets this information, believe me, there's nothing more that they would want to do than to stop any other illnesses from occurring. It's just that the way the system is set up for CDC reporting, the reporting systems for doctors and hospitals is not uniform. So when these things start to occur, FSIS basically has somebody watching the clock or watching the data with CDC every minute and trying to ascertain whether they need to move forward with declaring that there's a linkage between the illnesses associated with whatever is going on in the country. This particular case that Dr. Belk was talking about, it's unfortunate in how it came to be, but it's easy to see as a regulator that the amount of testing that occurs, you simply can't, as I think everybody in this room knows, you can't test every pound of beef that goes out. But when you have something that is as rare as one of these Aztecs, as we call them, it really drives home the issue of we really need to get better at how we are able to not test for them, because testing is, we're too late by the time we're testing for these products. What we need to do is we need to figure out in the feedlots and on the farms where these animals come from, what is causing those things to occur. Because simply testing, I believe, is basically trying to put a Band-Aid on something that needs surgery. It's just not, I don't think that it's very efficient for that. So this case is something that I know we had conversations, because there is a lot of noise in the retail area. There is a lot of noise as to how much more testing will be done. It simply isn't a matter of testing. It may make people feel better that there's more testing, but that is not the answer for a case like this. Did you want to comment on that at all? No, I agree with you. Okay.
I agree with
Okay,
you.
okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is this global position that I took with JBS. I thought things were complex in federal government. When you go to a company the size of JBS, you really have to be careful in what you say and the things that you want to do. I said one of the things that we really need to do is be up to date in our IT world. And so we need to put these tablets in front of every one of our QA people because we need real-time data. Well, I didn't realize that the next week they put 30 tablets in the hands of QAs, but there was nothing to support them. So I learned my lesson there in that you really have to do step-by-step kind of the reason why we need to do this. And so one of the things that we're really working diligently on is trying to find a system that will work for JBS worldwide. I know it sounds lofty, but to me, there's only one way to start to look at these issues, and I'm talking about preventing these foodborne illnesses and outbreaks, is for a company the size of JBS to have real-time data, not only in the establishments in which we use to harvest these animals, but we need to have data on the animals before they get there. And I realize that that is something that will take time, but I don't see it as something that can't be achieved. I also think that looking at how we do some of this testing and the platforms that are currently used for testing for 015787 for STEX. A lot of those testing platforms have not been updated in somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 years. I think we need to put our money where our mouth is and get the science behind this testing and have more rapid testing and testing that not only tests for the presence of, but for the virulence of the different types of pathogens that we're testing for.
Hey, it's a good start. Hopefully that's spawning some questions that you all are starting to jot down on your cue cards. And we're going to move down the line to Nathan.
Thanks. I'll pick up where you started out too. I'll talk about budgets, and we're a small privately held company, self-funded, so money is always the issue. But we're careful and we're cautious. We're doing what we can to build out the industry and work from there. Our focus is that very first step you're talking about, but for hand-harvested agriculture. We're looking at berries and lettuce and the half of your plate that you get that's fresh from the field. I know it's fresh in different ways, but it's fresh from the field and not processed typically in between. We're missing a kill step in our business. We don't get to cook our meat or our vegetables. We don't cook our vegetables the way your meat. So for us, testing is too late as well. Well, I worked in the industry for a number of years and worked on innovation, and we started out as a labor efficiency business, finding ways to improve against that labor challenge that all the farmers have in California, where we're moving to $15 an hour and 40-hour work week. Over a course of 5 years, we're going to see a 75 or 60% increase in cost and reduction in labor availability. So we thought we'll design this system from the ground up. How would you do it? Today we have a food safety system, a traceability system, that's kind of built as an insurance model, a kind of a peanut butter spread data capture. We also do a payroll data collection system that's separate from that. We also have a production mapping system separate from that. What we don't have is what you would build if you had a warehouse or a supply chain management system. Today, as all of us as individuals have the ability to drive down the highway and have our warehouse management system redirect us to the most efficient route possible. 15 years ago, you didn't have that. We're putting those devices in the hands of the field workers where they can register product right where it's harvested. That way, if we do have an outbreak, we can start to look back and see where were the common points long before testing ever happened. We can point to those places that say what happened. Recently in Yuma, Arizona, we lost the whole romaine crop this year. We had April 10th, we had an outbreak. 97 people were hospitalized, 5 people died, and we spent almost 4 months looking for that, what was the cause of that. We couldn't find any common intersections. Going to our earlier topics from weapons of mass destruction, it was coliform in the canal system. Somehow we got E. coli spread across our system. The common things that we would all be looking for, we found out it was coliform somewhat early. At that point, we started looking for the intersections. Which factory floor, which genetic strain it was, which field, what did it come from? And it came from multiple brands across. Our job is to pull that data set and immediately say that this would be a mass outbreak because of its breadth of where it came from right away. So at a high level, I mean, that's what we're after on a day-to-day basis. On the practical level, it's tough. You imagine taking farmers that today take data the way they do, and I grew up in the part of that pencil and paper generation, all the way to Excel, and now we have some database. We'll use systems like Monarch and others that along the way that help us get there. But go to the field level and tell them every one of your field workers, all 150 people picking strawberries, now have to register their data via IoT devices. It's a tough change, as we brought up earlier. Change is difficult in the farm. So we're trying to facilitate that from a day-to-day level out in California.
Awesome. Hopefully, people that are coming from small production units are going to have lots of questions for you this afternoon. Our third panelist, I've introduced Steve Laughlin. Before I turn it over, I want to make a bit of a point. You got the opportunity this morning to hear how the concept of blockchain has begun to be implemented within the food industry. And I think it was pretty exciting to see how and that it was beginning to be used. But now you get to talk to the guy that built it. So he's the guy that sat in Frank Giannis's office at Walmart and began the concept of putting that system together. And so I think it's been a great addition to the food industry, Steve, and hopefully you're going to tell us something about that.
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of people that'll take the credit for building it. I was there. So actually, as I sat here thinking, I'm a little bit of an example of a hammer that was looking for a nail. A tool, a technology that was looking for business problems that could, that hammer could help solve. And we're doing stuff with Golden State Food in meat right now, and I'll tell that story. But let me talk about, we can do a tutorial some other day on blockchain, but you have to skip the whole Bitcoin thing. The technology works. And the reason it works is, this is what I would tell my mother, is it's because you have a few things. One, you have shared and trusted data, because multiple parties have to, in essence, simplistically have to validate the data, validate or verify a block on the chain. If I'm speaking to somebody that doesn't understand it, I say it's a shared database, but you got to verify the block on the chain. So all of a sudden, you don't argue about my data versus your data. And so we started looking for problems in our industry to solve with consumer products companies, with ag companies, with retailers. And you might imagine that Walmart's one of our largest clients in the world. And, here's Frank, who people in this room know he's one of the biggest advocates for this issue in the world. And at first he's like, kind of looking at us like that confused dog look. And as we started to explain it to him, he started to say, really? And wow. And so the idea that we could start all the way back to Nathan, to what you're talking about, right back to the field, that we could start to capture data and store it, in essence, in a single data store, the blockchain, and be able to, when there was an incident, to quickly determine what farm, what lot, what day, was a concept, was an objective that was somewhat of the Holy Grail. And in the story Frank has told many times, and I tell, is the 2006, E. coli and spinach. It destroyed the industry, right? 196 incidents, 26 states, 31, kidney, HUSs, 3 deaths. Took weeks to determine. Every bit of spinach pulled off the shelf. I make the joke, that's how kale got in. So, by the way, do you know that if, as an industry, as a category, it took 6 years for spinach to return to the same sales volume? So think about the economic impact to that industry. As an industry in retail and the companies that moved that through the supply chain, there was enormous cost both to pull the product and then lost sales. So it's got real big, I don't want to downplay the loss of life and the healthcare cost, but it has massive cost economically as well. And so when we started to build the solution, we did a parallel test. Frank, who he'd argue his team's decent at Walmart, pretty darn good. They took mangoes and traced them in 6.5 days. He said, "Here you go." They didn't know. Walked in the room, put a thing of mangoes on the table, and said, "Okay, let's go. Where are they from?" and it was something like 6 days, 22 hours, and 31 minutes when they came back. About a week later, our CEO, Jenny, flew out to sit with Doug, did the same thing, walked in with a set of mangoes, scanned it, 2.2 seconds. So that's why we're now working with Kroger and Driscoll's and Unilever and McCormick, and I've forgotten a number of companies to roll this out and scale it and continue to enhance it. And the irony of it is that in some ways, food safety has become the Trojan horse of what's going to be massively more value to the industry, is that it's been the reason that we've solved what's really not a supply chain problem, but a supply web problem, is we've given the industry a reason to come together and solve the visibility, the provenance challenge in the industry. And now what people are seeing is, wait a minute, there's like that product is stalled at that processing center. We're losing 2 days of shelf life. And now it's become a bigger issue, which is, we know in fresh, what do we throw away? 25, 30, 38%. And all of a sudden now we're saying, wait a minute, this is a bigger issue. We have to feed the world, and we're throwing away food. And so this little problem of food safety that we're solving and improving is all of a sudden going to become the spark of helping solve a much bigger problem. And so I'm just a guy that was like a hammer. Our team was a hammer looking for a nail, and we're just honored to be part of it. And it was really because of our client.
Where is Walmart, and maybe you could talk about them and some of the other customers that you've worked with. Where are they now at this point on the implementation of using this technology?
Well, there's millions of products on. We're continuing to enhance the solution. So we've had, and every time people start to understand it, they have new requirements, like you want multi-ingredient, because originally it was just around fresh, and you want, and by the way, these gentlemen know more about this than I do, but then they want multi-ingredient, so we're continuing to build out the solution. But to give you an example, we get new examples. So McDonald's now has the fresh quarter pounder, right? So Golden State Foods, primary supplier, and it's very relevant now with what happened this week. 66 tons of meat recalled. If that's what I think Food Safety News said, 66 tons or something. So with the fresh, we took that food safety, or we call it the IBM Food Trust Solution, IFT, and we've tailored it with Golden State Foods, and it's in pilot. So we're doing those kinds of things, extending it to new categories. Where as soon as the carcass comes in, we start tracing the product, the temperature, and we're in pilot with, I think it's 8 or 12 McDonald's in Florida, all the way through the meat process, from the time it comes in, gets ground, pressed, put in a carton, put on a pallet, all the way to the restaurant. It's temperature tracked, and there's dashboards showing consumption and aging trends, temperature trends, and reduction of spoilage, because all of a sudden there's big economics in terms of making sure that meat's used within the 14-day life. And it just continues to sort of have this requirements evolution and adoption.
I think it's cool. Al, I'm going to, before we turn it over to the audience to ask some questions, I'm going to ask both of you guys. If you look at the outbreak that's occurring right now from the Fort Morgan plant, according to the FSIS recall notice, that product was actually in stores being marketed like in May last spring, and we're just now getting to the point where they've notified the company to do the recall. Well, the odds of that product being consumed already are pretty high.
It's gone.
And the same is true on the Cryptosporidium produce recall earlier this summer. So does a system like this, does it help? I mean, will that help alleviate that time in between the point where the product is consumed and the point where we're able to detect an outbreak or a problem?
So our inherent design is to capture data at the field level, at the picker level. We'll pass that data on to the blockchain as that first node. So we'll capture intersections like this all came from the same block. It all came from the same afternoon. It all came from the same employee after lunch. You can quickly come back and say, instead of recalling the entire spinach industry, let's stop the sale. And I was in Walmart a few years back. I bought a light bulb for my kid's Halloween outfit. Anyway, but they said it wasn't in inventory. I couldn't buy it. And I thought, that is amazing. They had stopped it from being in inventory and getting across the register before I bought it. Now, we enably, hopefully, with IBM's help, can have the capacity to take that employee and that cross-section of knowing that 3 people got sick by product harvested by the same employee after lunch from the same field on the same day, and we can just take that out of inventory before it crosses the register. So the idea that it could help that from happening, absolutely. Long before we ever knew why they got sick or what it was the cause of it. I mean, 1 billion times faster is amazing. It's still going to have to be a lot faster to beat the product to the retailer, to consumer.
How do you implement that thing over a company that operates in 100 different countries? I mean, it's a big task.
So the issue, to me, is not necessarily the traceback, because I can tell you this. From the minute Cargill was notified, they pretty much were already doing their traceback. So the traceback, yes, it'll shorten that time period, but for products like this, when you're working with CDC and you're having to rely on data that is supplied from hospitals and doctors, and you know, you just have those variables, it makes it a little bit more complex, right? So that piece, I don't know how we shorten that, other than, and I've said this before, I wish that we could get the medical community together so that there was a uniform system for reporting symptoms that are related to foodborne illness, because there is none. And I've talked to some physicians, and maybe one of them will retire and make billions of dollars putting a system like that together. But that's one of the biggest, I would say, one of the biggest gaps in being able to trace that illness or those illnesses or whatever the case may be.
So I'll ask you guys one more question, and then I'll shut up. So if, in the case of these outbreaks that we've sort of been using as an example, the cat's already out of the bag, what sorts of things can we do to prevent them from happening in the first place? Because that's ultimately got to be our goal. And so what are some tools that now are becoming available through this innovation concept that would help us to do a better job than perhaps what we're doing? And I recognize that food safety and crisis management is an evolutionary sport. We're going to always be better tomorrow than we were today. But what are some things coming along the pathway that will allow us to do a better job of preventing them from occurring to begin with? We'll start with you, Al.
First of all, I think the responsible use of animal drugs is key. I think, you know, having seen what drug resistance, antibiotic resistance does, that's something that I think we really need to pay attention to. We just need to be less focused on the dollar and more focused on human health. That's an easy thing to say, right? But what I mean by that is, if we pay attention to what we're feeding these animals and not cut corners because all of a sudden we wind up getting a lower cost feed from the Ukraine or wherever, we need to be smarter about that. And I think that as we start getting deeper into biosecurity, and looking at those types of issues, I think that we will be forced to be stricter on those types of markets, and perhaps that'll make a difference.
We work with hundreds of field workers in the strawberry fields and table grapes, and almost every one of them will comment, not that we're tracking every movement or doing something at work, the big brother factor. It's that you mean that that product can be tracked all the way from consumer back to me now. And so one of the farmers I work with talks about the accountability, treating these people like they're the professionals they are, and ending our reliance on mass inspection to catch everything. And the idea that I've seen baskets of strawberries come back with wedding rings in them. And the idea to be able to give that back to a person and be able to say, you're accountable to this, that it raises the bar at stopping those incidents from happening. I think that'll be one of the huge factors. The other part I think will be beneficial in that is the idea that because something happens in spinach or strawberries, not the whole industry has to go out of business. The way we do it today, Yuma, Arizona, romaine lettuce was out until June or July because of Yuma, Arizona. Romaine lettuce stops coming out of Yuma, Arizona in mid-March. So there were thousands of livelihoods that also went to crap because of that.
Excellent point.
Well, so continuing in my hammer looking for nails, that's part of what we do, right? So we continue to invest a lot of money in research, and then try to apply it into our industries. So you can Google this. There's a thing that we've been working on called the IBM Verifier. And again, explaining it to my mother, it's a big lens that can see things at a micron level. That's 1/1,000,000th of a meter. And with software that we put on phones, or imagine maybe on the line in a meat plant, I will tell you that with a client right now, we can in fact see E. coli. Now we can't identify which strain yet. That's what we're working on. And so we're going to get to the point where we can actually answer the question on every pound, and I would say within the next 12 months. And so there's that kind of thing that, same thing we're doing in retail with computer vision. By the way, if you're a self-checkout scanner, I would not recommend you steal the barcode off of a cheaper item and put it on the back of your hand, because we're using computer vision to just watch those scanners to see what you're passing over them. And the computer's vision is as smart as a human being. So it's those kinds of things that we're applying, artificial intelligence and this cutting edge kind of technology to. So we're trying to help, right? But that's the science we can bring to the table.
If we're at that point where we have this kind of capability, can a company afford to put it in? Is it at a level price-wise where it makes sense for?
Yeah, that's a great question. A few years ago, a lot of things used to be too expensive, or somehow technically too big. And you kind of asked that question earlier. I got to tell you, the way things have gone to mobile, gone to the cloud, it's no longer a case of the business case or the technology complexity. Today, it's mostly a case of bridging the imagination. It's not the business case anymore.
I think if it's something we can do that will prevent all of the costs associated with an outbreak, including the human and public health impact, it's got to be on the table.
The one thing I'll add is sometimes some of these things, though, are across the industry, and so figuring out how to get the different stakeholders to align, how do you get different stakeholders across different players in the industry, that can be a little complex. Like even that example I gave with Golden State Foods and meat, you've got the operator, McDonald's Corporation, you've got the franchisees, you have the producers of within the system. So I mean, you have complexities, but the value's there.
You know, I think the return on investment will be rather quick because you only need one, and it sets you back a pretty penny, right? I mean, like I said, it's unfortunate that this just happened to that company, but you ask them if they wish they'd have had this technology,
You bet your life.
right?
You brought up the other efficiencies that'll be generated from this, and I think that's the huge part. I was with a melon grower in the Central Valley of California not long ago, and he grows his own, and he markets and sells his own, and he listened to what we were talking about, and he said, wait a minute, you basically extended my WIP, my work in process, all the way back to the field. I can now sell this fresh product that I've got to line up trucks for and buyers for before it ever hits the docks. And that's, with taking data this way, that's the new value that can hit. And that is not small. One of your clients that I spoke with said that's $1 million a day to them as a fresh market person. That's taking that produce that they have that was selling for $10 and knowing that they got too much in at the end of the day, saying, what am I going to do with what I've got left? Selling the rest for $3. And that adds up to $1 million every day of their business.
And they're going to integrate your data into SAPs available to Promise to do that.
Yeah. Well, guys, we've been talking now for about 30 minutes or so. Let's turn it over to the audience and see if we have any questions ready.
While there are many opportunities for improvement, has our food supply ever been more safe?
Who wants that one?
I think it kind of goes back to what Keith said. I mean, I believe that every day it gets safer, but in the space of food production, there will always be room for improvement. And as I started to allude to some of these issues around responsible use of animal drugs, you start looking at feed and feed production and feed production practices. I mean, all these things that add up. I would say, yes, we've never seen the numbers as low as they are today for both 015787 and for STEX. But how do you say that to that person's family that just died? So there's always room for improvement.
And I mean, the rest of the world envies what we do, and most of it comes from not necessarily from measurement and metric and process. It comes from the pride that you guys as farmers and generational pride that we've taken in what we've done as an industry. I think it starts there, and that's where it lends off. And even the field workers in California, if you come out there and pick berries next to them, I mean, they will coach you on how to do it right, to how to pack it so that it ends up in a box that you as a consumer like later. And that isn't like metrics or controls. That's pride.
Good answers.
How to apply these safety methods to foreign sourced foods and brand new products that have little history with food chain stakeholders?
Let's start with how that would apply using the blockchain technology, because I think that plays a role here.
Well, I think the first thing is, I think one of the things that we'll start to do is, and there was a comment earlier about about data and data in, and can you manipulate the data in this morning. And I think one of the things that we're also able to do is now apply both analytics and AI to the data, and you can tell whether data is being artificially manipulated and inputted. Like if somebody in the field's putting in just bogus data shows up as bogus inputted data. So I think my response would be is as you start to if you have these standards and you start to capture the data early on, you can start to, based on the life cycle, start to understand patterns very quickly. And and this is where we're starting to use machine learning, which is constantly driving recorrelations to do that. Now, this is not my area of expertise, so we should be deferring to some of the people that are a little closer. But that's when I hear that, and I hear new introduction, new sources, whether overseas or not, I don't care. Is we take the history of the learned patterns and we apply that with machine learning to the new sources of data, and we quickly start to see where there's potential issues.
It's a supply chain control issue, so, I mean, you guys deal with that. What's your perspective?
So before I left the agency, one of the things that we were working on was sharing data for products that were being imported to the United States and rejections of those products with other countries. And so you think about it and you're like, well, that's an easy thing to do. It's not very easy because every country has a different platform for their data systems, and so getting one to speak to another is not very easy. I'll say that. But if we can start thinking in terms of, look, food safety is not something that we need to be so proprietary in the data that we're accumulating, right? So if we'll just use Mexico, for example, because I was able to look at their data of rejections, and I said, who do you notify when you reject this product from this country? And they said, we don't notify anybody. The interesting thing is that they use the U.S. Navy information. I don't know what they call it, but it's basically the U.S. Navy that tracks these ships that are going back once they reject these products. And so I'm thinking, well, we don't even get to see that in the United States. But my point is the closer we can get to sharing these data systems to inform Mexico or Chile or whomever, we rejected this load of catfish and this is why we rejected it, then everybody knows not only that shipment, but at least they will understand this product is of some type of risk, right? So building that through the countries, and we shouldn't be competing with other countries about who gets the best product. It should be safe when it gets to our borders.
And I mean, you talked about it as if it was pre-competitive, to tie it back to the other talk, but I look at it a little bit as if it was a competitive opportunity. So I'm hoping with the consumers, that megatrend, consumers are asking for transparency. If we can unleash a level of transparency on them never before seen, would they pay more for it? And if that creates a distinguishable advantage, because I don't know a farmer that wouldn't be happy to get a few bucks more for their produce or their product as a sale point. And if they had that opportunity and we created new efficiencies for them, then it's awesome. But immediately, transparency looks like a cost to most of the farmers I talk with.
Well, in fact, many of our clients view this as an enormous opportunity on the brand side, on the transparency side. And in fact, I will tell you, Walmart and Frank view this ultimately for them as an opportunity to enhance their brand, to show the quality of their sourcing, and to be able to say that this is from this farm. And here's, by the way, the story of the farmer and the story of the terroir. And and so they intend to do that. And by the way, it's got ancillary things. If I've been in Amsterdam with JDE, the coffee company, right? And they have different issues. They want to talk about the bean, how the bean was picked, who it was picked by, that it was the right labor. I've sat and talked with Nike, and they want to talk about the factory and how the factory was operated and the conditions of the factory. Right, so there's a whole lot of different motivations in terms of really a common solution across the consumer supply chain whether it whether it be sustainability, whether it be ethical business practices, whether it be the quality or the story of the farm. So there's tremendous branding opportunities, Nathan. You're 100% right. And there are going to be people that, as a result, yield more margin, and as a result, are willing to pay more to the source.
I want to play devil's advocate for just a second here. So in 1998, the beef industry all met together, and this was shortly after their problems with E. coli 157 and the Jack in the Box restaurants. And they decided as an industry, and I'm talking all the big players here, they decided every time that we have a food safety blip, and you guys have mentioned this several times, it doesn't hurt just the company that produced the product, it hurts the entire business. And so you've got the public health thing, which is bad enough, and then on top of that, you basically stall the entire business enterprise. So is that a model that is working? What they've said is we're not going to compete on food safety. We're going to, if Tyson comes up with a new technology that seems to work and it's cost effective and it improves food safety, they're going to share it with all their competitors and vice versa. And so I guess my point is that a workable type philosophy? Is it something we should pursue in the other commodities, or is it, in capitalism, does it not work? Al, what do you think? You were there.
I knew you were going to have me go first. So that's the million-dollar question, right? Because I would like to say that food safety isn't competitive, but it is. It simply is. And I'll say that when the chips are down, like they are for this company that's going through this the situation, we were all on the phone this morning talking about, so it's no longer Cargill or it's no longer Tyson, it's the industry, and we were talking about what we need to do. So on that hand, yes, I agree with you 100%, because it doesn't matter what the brand is, we're all going to come together and try to figure out a better way to keep consumers safe, no doubt about it. But when it comes to, look, if I can find something that's just a little bit better than what you've got, I don't think that's going to be shared. I simply don't, because right now, the thing that's different than my previous job in government is P&L, EBITDA, and everything else, right? You're talking about the bottom line. So if I find a technology that somehow gives me a competitive advantage, and I'm not making the rest of the industry worse, but I'm making myself better, I don't know. I haven't seen it yet, but I don't know.
I think maybe it's going to look a little bit different. Farmers are typically, or at least agricultural companies, and pretty much every business I've ever worked in, is data rich and decision poor. And it might be how you parse that data that comes out that makes you really competitively different, and how you tell that story. You talked about terroir. I mean, I work in the strawberry industry, and from Monterey to Salinas, the east side of Salinas, there's probably about 12 miles and about 200 microclimates. And you can grow a strawberry completely different from one side to the other. Different yields, different flavors, different shelf life, all kinds of components. Each of those farmers lives in an art. But to have they can all end up with the same data sets and totally make different decisions to get product out the door. And that's going to be total competitive and totally like, this is what my thing is. And then you add to the significance that every box is picked by a different person. Every decision for every single berry that you'll eat was picked or was made by somebody's till AI gets there and IBM solves that for us. It's picked by a person, and that decision is governed. So you've got all that variation on top, and being able to make cool decisions and stuff that competitively puts your business ahead from that, I think will be amazing.
Do you have any comment? You're trying to help them all, so.
Well, that's exactly right. I'm an arms dealer, and I try to sell the firepower to everybody. So the truth is, I think Al's right. I mean, look, unless it's really, really an innovative, research-driven, and that's very rare. The fact is, if we come up with it, we've tried to sell it to everybody. By the time they drive adoption, everybody's seen it, and they've either decided, that's not our priority, that is our priority, every once in a while. So I'd say, if it's going to make a real step function difference, everyone's going to end up doing it. So,
That seems to be
no,
mostly
but the
what's
thing I
happening.
was describing, people are going to make different choices to use the data to drive their brand different ways, and frankly, all these companies are strategically going different directions anyway. You look at what Cargill, ADM, they're all kind of going slightly different directions. Because they've all chosen, the business has changed, the industry's changed, and they've adopted. So they're not, I don't think any of them would say they're quite competing the way they once did.
Where's the FBI now with their WMD and the arms dealer here?
This question's for Steve. You commented that your team was a hammer looking for a nail. In other words, you built a solution and are looking for a problem to solve. This can lead to solutions that don't address all intricacies of a problem, for example, 90% solution. Are you flexible enough to shape your solution to be a 100% solution?
Yeah, well, it's not really that far. I mean, when you think about it, we recognize that, a good question, by the way, great question. It wasn't that far advanced. But we recognized that this invention of underlying Bitcoin or cryptocurrency had far broader applications, as an example. Or, as I said, we continue, IBM Research continues to be about 3,500 researchers that, if you were to look, leads the world in patents, US patents filed for something like the last 15 or 20 years. So we continue to do this kind of research. And then we work to look to how to apply the research into business applications. So I wouldn't call them solutions, and that's what I meant. In this case, we knew that blockchain had many business applications because what it did was it enables what I'll call enterprise applications. So we have a lot of enterprise applications, SAP, Oracle. That stuff's really good inside a company. But doing functionality, applications between companies, we've never had very good answers. We got flat files and EDI and some web services and things, but functionality between companies. And so we recognized that blockchain was really going to be this enabler of that because of this shared database concept. So the answer is yes. It was not nearly as advanced as 90%. We recognized it was this foundation that we could build all this enterprise functionality on. And I haven't even touched on all the different things we're doing across the industry other than really just in this supply chain space, but we're doing things in trade promotion. So JB Swift spends a fortune on trade promotions with your customers in the retail industry, and we're doing work there to simplify that, and so on and so forth. So we looked for applications where we could build solutions with this foundational technology.
This is directed towards Al and Nathan. You both mentioned that testing is too late. If you had field side or pen side testing tools that are simple, efficient, and reliable, could they be value added to a quality management system?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're not dismissing the testing and the value of it. I think it's the intersection of what the testing can bring and what else happened. The idea that you had one cow test positive, when you tested one cow, might indicate that you might have a feed problem or you might have a water problem. That's what we're looking for. And then highlight the warning, go after it as an issue, and then be able to cross-reference the commonalities. So it's finding ways to include things. I mean, the blockchain doesn't say it's a data source, or the people that promote blockchain don't say they're a data source. They're saying we're a common thread that we can all attach our data onto. And so testing is still not, it's not lost in that. It's definitely part of that.
Yeah, so what I meant is testing is too late is, sure, when the industry's testing, they can remove all the product that they receive positive indicators for that product. The problem is if, for example, there's some trim that slips by, that, for example, is not caught in that 10-minute window or in that 15-minute window, and it comes from a single animal, then all the testing in the world isn't going to stop that from getting out into commerce. So, you know, obviously everybody in the industry has these algorithms that they use for testing schemes. So some do it every 10 minutes, depending on volume, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but nonetheless, that's what I was talking about. I mean, they can remove product that they get positives from right then. It's the stuff in the gaps that gets out.
Will blockchain, as proposed, impact documented and undocumented labor availability?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Will it impact labor, this new technology?
So there's going to be levels of immunity and between the data that you collect. I mean, we did demonstrations of field workers their picture being shown on the packaging, or by following the URL on the packaging. You just scan the QR code and you could pull it up. And there's some concern by that, and there's also some privacy from that. It'll happen, yes, but and it will be, there are protections inside of that already. So it's a tough one to really pick out that it's going to change.
Yeah, so now I better understand. So yeah, we've worked through with the collection of companies that we're working with a number of data visibility issues. So this is not something we're doing alone, right? There's a governance group that this is an industry effort. There's a number of data visibility permission issues, right? So because, for example, Kroger is not allowed to see where Walmart sources their product, obviously, right? And of course, the various consumer products companies don't want their competitors seeing, their information. So there's a number of permissioning issues that we're working through with these early participants. And we have been and we continue to be working through. So I'm sure, and I'm not in every level, but that kind of issue is definitely one of them.
The farmer's data is still the farmer's data.
Yeah, exactly.
And they'll share what they feel appropriate.
Now, so if I'm Walmart and I want to be able to highlight, or Kroger here, King Super, right? King Super here in Colorado is Kroger. King Super wants to highlight Colorado farmers. They're going to turn to their farming partners and go, "I'd like to highlight you and perhaps some of your farm labor, so I can give you kudos in the store." That'll be something that we'll be able to enable in the solution, so that we may be able to do that. So those are the kinds of things we're working through.
Guys, we have just a minute left, so we're going to have to be brief here, but I'd like to go down the line, and all of you represent different industries and really unique and innovative industries. Tell us a little bit. There's a lot of students in the room today. What do they need to do to fit into your program?
I'll go first. So this is a question that came up 3 days ago or 4 days ago at the wine, or at the table grape meeting we had. There was a bunch of young people up there, the farm people of the future, and they said something about, "I've tried almost everything, and I've been a part of all these startups." And the young people out here, you've been a part of a technical revolution. You know, you've got your phones and computers, and you do more than we'll ever imagined. But your parents and grandparents were part of a metal revolution. They had a grove full of equipment that is broken and didn't work. They tried those things, and they made those efforts to change and innovate. You're going to have to go through a lot of this stuff, and you will find the magic thing that really changes your business and industry. But don't shy away from failure. That's the thing you're going to come out knowing, and encourage it in whatever app you buy or whatever startup you bring in to find that next solution. Just, it helps you define your problems better so that you can get to that next issue. And then come intern for us, but expect low wages and long hours.
I would say that in the food industry, there are a lot of exciting opportunities. I mean, the only thing that has stayed the same in this industry is how they harvest these animals and basically how it goes out the door. But everything else in the middle has changed. And so technology is changing everything in this industry. And I would say to students that, I mean, here's an opportunity to be a leader and to come and bring your ideas, because I'll tell you, I look around and there just aren't a whole lot of new ideas coming out right now. And so thinking about the impact that you could have on an industry that the world depends on. And that's another thing I could talk forever about. It used to be where the meatpacking house basically serviced the neighborhood. But now whatever is harvested here, regardless of where it is, I was over in Mongolia and I saw a doggone turkey for $72 from the United States. And they said that they couldn't keep them on the shelf. If they're from the United States, that product flies off the shelf first. So not only are we doing one heck of a job already, but to be part of an industry that can be even better and more innovative, I think there's just a great opportunity there.
I think I'd say, first of all, this is simple, but pick something you're passionate about. Do what's right for what I would call your client, your customer. Do what's right for your company. Do what's right for your community. And the right things are going to happen to you 99% of the time. And then stay on a very, very steep personal learning curve. Don't hold anybody accountable for your steep personal learning curve but yourself. And if you kind of focus on those three things, I think you'll have a wonderful professional runway.
Everybody help me thank our panel this afternoon.